I think most of us are in the room probably are from that more traditional mining background, and we know, most of the capital that goes into technology innovation is from OEMs, from the R&D side. I think it was an OSMINE report that said there's something like, in just 1 year we had, I think $8.5 billion of R&D capital just from the top 20 OEMs alone. So really now we want to flip this conversation to talk about how we leverage all the other funding mechanisms, the traditional ones, but also some of the others. And the three of you here are, I think, some of the best in industry for looking at those different sources and building technology rapidly or supporting that ecosystem in a variety of ways. So, and feel free, based on what you've heard from the other panelists, to change any of the questions that we had or anything else you want to add to kind of build on that conversation more broadly. But I'll first just ask if you could each introduce yourselves briefly as well, starting with you, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Carey. I work for IMDEX and have had a number of different roles with IMDEX over the years across our product development, M&A, strategy portfolios. My role now probably illustrates all of those things coming back to haunt me in a way, where I'm taking 5 startups that we've bought over a period of time, combining them with a bunch of internal R&D programs that we've had and using it.
That's pretty awesome. Thanks all for taking your time over lunch to come and hang out with us.
Yeah, I didn't even
My name's Zane. I'm one of the directors of Unearthed, but also one of the co-founders and directors of Core. At Core, we build innovation infrastructure and ecosystems for the resource sector. What does that mean? We have a bunch of hubs across Australia that help resource companies, mining, oil and gas companies, go from 0 to 1 in the space. And we're the operators of ARP, the Australian Autonomous Robotics Precinct. Can I take a quick poll? How many of you heard about ARP?
Nice.
That's great. So we're getting good penetration. Hopefully by the end, you'll all be excited about it as well. It's 57 hectares that we, in partnership with DevWA, operate. That's an open-air testing facility for any startup or any OEM or anybody to come down and test and validate their applications.
Hi everyone, my name's Jan, and actually next week's going to be my last week as the MD of Switch, which has been an amazing journey over the last year and a half. But I have spent the best part of the last 10 years being obsessed in one way or another around inventing and bringing new technology into industry. And I think as a product of living in Perth and loving that, it's funnily enough very often had a lot to do with the mining industry. In Switch, in a previous business that I started the Aussie arm of called First Mode, that achieved a pretty wild valuation at one point. We've had the side effect of getting a lot of money in a lot of weird and wonderful ways. Almost none of which went down the traditional VC route. So I really enjoyed learning some of these previous sessions. So.
Which is why you're here to talk about all these other mechanisms. So I guess on that, before we get into some of those, I'm keen to get each of your perspectives on the current, I guess, like capital market for technology development. What needs to change? Do we need to look at it differently? Or do you think it's working effectively? Anything in that space?
I feel like it's a bit unfair being the third panel, because I thought the first 2 panels did a really good job of talking about some of the things that need to change, and I would definitely echo a couple of them, in particular this piece around the gap in funding. And of course this is the space where we play ourselves. I mean, there's a reality here. I think I heard a lot of conversation around the metabolism of the mining industry. Part of this is around, there's the technology to develop, then there's the technology to actually, then there's the effort and the money to actually get technology adopted. That takes time, that takes money, that takes commitment. I think if we're not finding ways to fund that as well as funding the start, then it's not going to be enough. And obviously this is the space that we play, but it needs a lot of people like us. I will, by the way, say that I twitch every time you call us an OEM, by the way. I think of us as a large mining technology company.
Okay, change, noted.
No.
I think the discussion's been really good. From my side in mining, we need our own way. We have our own metabolism. We have the own way for both developing, building, testing, validating, and growing companies into the space. Trying to take models that work in other industries with other metabolism rates just doesn't really work. So it's great to see that we're actually building out our own system, and we're building out our own approach because we need it.
Yeah, look, I have no idea, Holly, like where capital markets are at the moment, because I have very little focus on it. But I think my only comment is that I would say, personally, I'm far more turned on by someone saying there's no money for that at the moment. This is a really interesting problem, but there's no money, because I think as a startup, being scrappy and being constrained in how you actually get the initial kernel of an idea happening is super important. So if you can be successful in an environment where you're being told it's really, really hard to get money, then I think that's something you can bank for scale and healthier growth in the future when there's a inevitable change in the cycle.
And I might stay with you, Jan, because I think, as you kind of mentioned to start with First Mode and Switch, you've had some very interesting journeys about developing technology quite rapidly with a range of different mechanisms. And can you, I guess, share a bit of those stories in terms of what you needed from a capital perspective, where that came from, and how you leverage things? I mean, at Switch, I know you've had some really interesting partnerships as well. Yeah,
there's lots. So firstly, who's heard the old story of a startup getting bought by a big company, let's say a mining company, or an OEM for that matter, and then seeing significant evidence of that slowing down once the acquisition is closed? It can often be the death knell of a business. And First Mode, which I joined in 2020, designed a hydrogen fuel cell powered haul truck as a consulting engagement for Anglo American. And this became a piece of the core part of Anglo American's strategy for decarbonisation at the time. And so instead of, ultimately, a consulting engagement is just far too risky for that. So we went into a step where we formed a joint development agreement, and suddenly we couldn't walk away from time and materials-based work with 30 days notice. We were a bit more committed, and Anglo took a 10% equity stake in the business. But ultimately what ended up in happening was, rather than First Mode be acquired by Anglo and absorbed into that business, Anglo American got their team that was focused on this decarbonisation and put that into a new entity, and then merged those two businesses, and we kept the branding First Mode. It was a really, in many ways, it was really, really successful. Probably there were some side effects of all of the enthusiastic people inside Anglo that loved that product suddenly weren't actually working for them anymore. So there are actually some unintended consequences that aren't great. There's no perfect solution, but that certainly was a really interesting way of raising capital and moving the company forward.
Anything from Switch to add from some of your part in tech?
Yeah, so again, consulting business model, so able to fund and bootstrap ideas and business ventures that are sitting underneath us. So lots to do with battery technology, lots to do with haul trucks, hybrids, locomotives. We will have a hybrid locomotive modification driving around a test track in Colorado, in Denver with a partner, Dayton Phoenix, which is an OEM based in Ohio. We'll have a hybrid haul truck on Pilbara Minerals, now PLS's site, using a battery technology coming out of Cambridge with Ekion technology, which is a very high performance battery tech. Now, all of those, some of those products that we're working on as a consultancy are actually owned by Switch and are taking funding sometimes in the form of debt or equity with the customers that are trying to scale the product. So it's very much aligned to that venture studio model, but not necessarily capital rich. It can still be bootstrapped, and I think it's a really healthy model in some ways, because if it forces you to get product market fit. A product really has to stand up and be able to defend itself, really, really early compared to, potentially spending hundreds of $millions and building the wrong thing.
I think it probably causes focus as well, right? I think when I talk to startups, I think it can be really tempting in those early days, particularly if you've got capital, to maybe chase the money a little bit. And I think you're right that there's some discipline in that.
Well, focus is really hard. So if you're a consulting business, are you actually building 4 different products at the same time? You've got to be really disciplined about how you divide it. And I've seen the mistake made both ways, where you spread yourself too thin and you can't progress a product fast enough. And I've seen it the other way, where you bet the farm and you bet the whole company on a product and you get it wrong. And that's the one that's more catastrophic, from what I've seen.
And Michelle, looking from, I think IMDEX is known as one of the more innovative, mining technology companies in the industry. And I guess building on that, obviously you look at that from a product perspective, not necessarily just a venture or company building perspective. And from, you obviously deploy a fair bit of R&D capital as well as look at M&A. Can you talk a bit about that strategy for technology development in your capital deployment?
Yeah, and I think you're using the right phrase there, right? It's capital deployment, and so we manage it like you would an investment portfolio, because that's in essence what it is. Some important things for us, one of them is consistently of the deployment of capital. We make a commitment to our shareholders that we'll spend 8 to 10% of revenue year in, year out, regardless of cycle. Obviously, that's really critical in terms of maintaining the talent internally to do that, but also to make sure that we can be developing things in the down parts of the mining industry cycle that we can benefit from once the cycle turns. And then the rest of us are normal decisions around how you manage risk across a portfolio. So we'll do early stage pieces, but we'll then balance that against feature improvements around the products that we already have in the marketplace to give us that balance. And for us, the last piece is, we do internal R&D. You just heard the percentage of spend of revenue that goes to that, but we also do M&A as well, which means we need to make build versus buy versus indeed collaborate decisions all the time. Generally, the basis of that sort of decision making will be what's our true core capabilities. If something's very close to those core capabilities, we'll generally look to try and build using our own team. If it's not, and this is, you've got to be really honest with yourself around what your core capabilities are. When it's not our core capability and we can see that someone else has it, then we'll look to partner, or we'll look to invest and move to acquisition. And then I would say, though, the other reason that we might choose to buy is a brutal reality about time to market. As slow as adoption is, we want to get product into the market at least as quickly as we can sometimes, to make sure that we're maintaining our competitive edge. And there's a reality sometimes that you can find a smaller company that's moving fast at solving a problem, and you invest in them and you push them to get it into the market as quickly as you can, rather than doing it yourself. So lots of portfolio balancing.
And do you, I know this was an off-script question, but do you engage with the VC market much? You do?
Yeah, absolutely we do. I mean, I think there's a reality that we probably most of the time invest a little bit later than VC now, so that's one reason. And the other one's deal flow, just like everybody else, because we are also engaging in M&A, we want to see deal flow as much as anyone else. And so, we're part of the ecosystem. We talk to a lot of the different funds, and we talk about when it's a good fit for them and when it's a good fit for us, just like VC funds talk amongst themselves.
Cool. So Zane, as you mentioned, Core kind of operates a range of kind of innovation infrastructure like ARP, but these things don't come for free, they cost money. And we have seen some of the kind of mining-owned test sites actually been shut down when the miners no longer can kind of justify that capital. So I'm keen to understand your perspective on what's kind of the capital required to maintain these kind of things. And obviously there's kind of a call from the market that we need more of them, because as we've had so much this morning already, or lunchtime, sorry, afternoon, that getting to site is really hard. So these test environments are super valuable, but yeah, what's the capital requirement to do it at scale?
Yeah, it's been really good to hear from everybody else how important it is to test and validate for industrial applications. It's super critical. You never get on site unless you have some level of validation. And then to do that at scale is really, really hard. So I think these test facilities like ARP are critical. ARP it's genuinely the WA government leading. So they had a whole bunch of land just north of the city that instead of turning it into a normal industrial precinct, they opened it up and said, let's try this thing. Initial capital was about 28 million bucks, which for the government's not much at all. For one miner or for one OEM or for one partner to be able to manage that amount of capital and then the operating cost is too much. And so now that it's in operation phase, there's a number of partners that actively use the site on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, and it really is across the stack, all the way from startups to mining technology companies to the miners themselves. That put enough funding back into the organization, back into the facilities to pay for it on an ongoing basis. That was not possible without initial unlock of opening up both the land and the building to make it possible. I think that everybody should be looking at where they can do some of this innovation infrastructure unlock throughout the value chain. So we don't talk enough about sample libraries and where should we have open, well-curated sample libraries that anyone can apply to and get a reasonable cost, can get a sample from. We don't talk enough, at least in Australia, about undergrounding mining and how we can develop and facilitate undergrounding mining tech, again, across the stack, from startups all the way through to the later players. And then when we go to pilot plants and so on, there's a lot of opportunity for us to develop out this common infrastructure. I also feel it's a bit of a race because the US just put forward an initiative on 80 million US to support mining testing facilities throughout the US. That's going to be really big. And actually, if we don't collaborate well on that and get involved in that well, I think we're going to see a number of the companies that have actually relocated here, some of their R&D facilities and some of their technology development, relocate back to the US and develop it there.
So I just really have to echo what Zane's saying there, and having seen this in reality, the previous business being US headquartered, spent more than $10 million US just on setting up this kind of test infrastructure to drive a haul truck around. And then Switch was able to go in and use that infrastructure for a very small monthly fee. Like, that's a huge amount of money you don't have to raise. And then I think in the same category around that, when you're thinking around investment, we had PLS as an early customer give us a haul truck to modify to turn it into a hybrid. Those machines are, depending on the model, somewhere between $5 and $15 million new. And so if you're thinking about how much you're trying to raise just to pay for a couple of engineers in a Series A, like putting $5 million to buy a haul truck into your Series A, like it doesn't really fit that model. And so those in-kind things that can come from industry are worth a lot more money than those initial couple of $100,000.
Yeah, I might jump in on the ARP fangirling. Obviously, we use the facility pretty extensively ourselves. Blast Dog's out on stand, and its natural home actually is roaming free on ARP. And I would call out actually that it's useful through a lot of phases as well. I mean, obviously we use it for early stage testing, but we also use it in training. We also use it to show off the tech to our customers. So for us, it's been a bit of a game changer.
Yeah, I think you guys have been great partners as well. You were the first one to open up and drill the drill bench. And so now, if any of you have drill technology that you want to test, there is a drill bench ready to be tested on. from what I understand, that's the only one globally that you can just quickly say, hey, I'd like a couple days to go test X, Y, and Z on that drill bench.
And I might build on that, that situation in the US. And I think the US as a capital market is always going to be able to throw the most capital. And I think traditionally Australia kind of has been known as that place to really demonstrate technology, even if you're getting capital and potentially doing your early stage build, elsewhere in the world. Now we're seeing the US kind of come into that testing, proving ground as well. How do you see that do you think that, I mean, we kind of meant maybe that's a bit of a threat for Australia, but we do have, I guess, the proximity to industry here and some of these in-kind. So what do you think we should be looking at as a local industry to make sure we still attract people here for that tech demonstration?
Yeah, so we did a quick study across Unearthed. It was a startup impact study, so we actually did interviews with the startups that have gone through some of the open innovation programs, and we ended up finding these like weird archetypes. Europe, amazing R&D, very methodical government support, and then into venture support. High technical capacity. They had to look other places to test. The US was a lot of the startups, my God, they got thrown a lot of money and a lot of money early to just go. And a number of them had a number of issues of testing, validating, actually, which mining company am I going to speak to? And then you had the Australian archetype, which almost had no money, but had a mate and knew how to get on site and knew how to test and validate a product. And it was really interesting to see the difference. And then you can see a world where they start to come together and they bring out the best of each one, and you can have a real ecosystem to develop and build out some pretty amazing companies in the space.
I mean, it's interesting. We've got R&D facilities in all three of the archetypes, actually, and I'll definitely agree that that's the way it plays out. But I think that point, and we heard a lot of it in the two panels that came before us around the need to connect to customers and to be in front of customers and to really make sure that you're solving the problems that the industry has. That remains a special sauce, I think. Yes, there is mining in the US, but nothing close to the scale that we have, and nothing like the ecosystem that joins those miners to those technology providers to the test facility. So I think if we think about it holistically as an ecosystem, that's a really good way to hold competitive advantage.
All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to put you all a bit on the spot. But based on, I guess, the other discussions you've heard today before this one, I guess how would you summarize where you think we should be going from a capital perspective in technology into the future? Or anything else you'd like to say?
Look, I think the first response that comes to my mind, and I spent a fair bit of time working at Amazon, so I've been very much indoctrinated in being obsessed with having a customer in mind. So personally, I think having customers really enthusiastic and wanting to work with your product is a thing where you can find a path to capital, whatever way that needs to be. Like if you're working on a product and that product's got a really enthusiastic set of customers, like you'll find a way if you're dogmatic and annoying enough to make it happen. Sometimes that takes more patience than you'd think, but I would just say that's rather than saying you should start this particular path for capital, I would say starting with that as a beginning. But I think to echo those archetypes, I think there's plenty of examples where I've got experience where going to a VC or finding the right VC earlier might have been a better idea than grinding it out, bootstrapping and taking a long time. Yeah. So I think we can all learn from each other in different styles of finding money to make things happen.
Yeah, and maybe picking up, I think that ecosystem piece is really important. I think it's amazing that there's so much early stage VC money coming in, to be clear. I think it only matures and strengthens all of us to have that money. So I think it's making sure that it all continues to work together, that we all know our place and know our roles, and that we all work together. But also that metabolism piece, I think it echoes across all three panels. How do we get how do we get a metabolism that works for us rather than being pushed into models that have worked in other industries?
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I would. We've talked a lot about VCs. I think in the mining space and generally in the technology space here, we should be talking a lot about bootstrapping and actually growing through revenue, and a lot of growing through partners, and a lot of other models. I don't think there's a ton of great VC opportunities, but there's a ton of broad opportunities to build technology in this space.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think it's been a fascinating conversation, so thanks to all of our speakers. I encourage everyone to keep the conversation going, and hopefully we're seeing more of these kind of closer connections between those two parts of the ecosystem moving forward. Please join me in thanking us. Oh, there you go. That's the end. Thank you so much.